Welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because we are about to fundamentally shatter and then completely rebuild the way you view the most magnificent, beautifully complex creatures to ever walk the earth. We're taking those dusty old textbooks, tossing them right out the window, and diving into the absolute cutting-edge science of the dinosaurs. So I want you to picture a dinosaur in your head right now. Are you seeing a sluggish, scaly, giant, cold-blooded lizard just kind of dragging its tail through a primordial swamp? Well, if you are, you're definitely not alone. I mean, that was the scientific consensus for nearly a century. But here's the thing. Everything you thought you knew about these magnificent animals is rapidly evolving, just as they did. Okay, let's jump straight into Section 1, Redefining the Dinosaur. To really understand where the science is at today, we have to strip away the pop culture myths. What actually makes a dinosaur? It's not just about being giant and extinct. The term Dinosauria, which means terrible lizard, was coined by Sir Richard Owen back in 1842. But taxonomically speaking, dinosaurs are defined by their legs. They're archosaur reptiles, but with hind limbs held perfectly erect right beneath their bodies. This upright posture completely transformed their lifestyle compared to the sprawling push-up stance of other reptiles like crocodiles. And actually, this is exactly why those massive swimming plesiosaurs or the flying pterosaurs you always see in movies don't make the cut. They are incredible prehistoric reptiles for sure, but anatomically, they aren't true dinosaurs. Moving on to Section 2, Feathers in Warm Blood. This is where things get really wild. For decades, scientists went back and forth wondering, were dinosaurs cold-blooded or warm-blooded? Well, thanks to some mind-blowing molecular analysis of oxygen waste products preserved inside fossilized bones, we now know the answer is both. There was an incredible evolutionary split. Slow-moving, heavily armored herbivores, think along the lines of the Stegosaurus, were cold-blooded. They operated a lot like modern lizards. But on the flip side, those highly mobile, ravenous predators like the Allosaurus and famously the Velociraptor, they ran incredibly hot. To really wrap your head around the sheer metabolic cost of that lifestyle, just compare a warm-blooded endotherm, like a modern mouse, to a cold-blooded ectotherm, like a lizard. Running hot means you expend massive amounts of energy. You require constant food and oxygen just to keep the furnace burning, so to speak. But the payoff? It's huge. These hot-blooded dinosaurs could thrive and even migrate to wildly diverse and freezing climates, whereas the cold-blooded ones were totally at the mercy of whatever the temperature was outside. Now, if you're running hot, you need a way to keep that heat in, right? Enter feathers. Decades of truly astounding fossil discoveries, particularly out of China, have proven that feathers were actually a widespread dinosaur trade millions and millions of years before anything ever took to the skies. And we are not just talking about tiny little bird-like creatures here. We are talking about massive predators. Take the Eutyrannus, 30 feet long and totally covered in primitive fuzz. Honestly, the idea that the T-Rex itself might have sported a fuzzy coat is a very real, scientifically backed possibility. This brilliantly illustrates something scientists love to point out. Flight was basically an evolutionary afterthought for feathers. Long before flight was even a thing, plumage served a bunch of completely different daily functions. Dinosaurs like the small maned Tianyalong used simple fuzzy feathers for thermal insulation and UV protection. Then, on the other end of the spectrum, researchers have found that the ostrich-like Struthium mimus had these long, elaborate feathers on its arms. Now, arms like that couldn't possibly be used for flight. Instead, they almost certainly used them for flashy courtship displays and species communication, exactly the way modern ostriches do today. Let's dive into Section 3, Preserving Ancient Soft Tissue, because to understand how we know all these details, we have to shift our scale. We're moving from macroanatomy all the way down to the molecular level. For the longest time, it was just an absolute, unquestioned rule in paleontology. After 65 million years, all organic material is replaced by rock. Period. End of story. So, you can imagine the utter disbelief researchers felt back in 2005. They dissolved a fragment of a demineralized Tyrannosaurus rex bone and found soft, flexible, transparent blood vessels and proteins still perfectly intact inside. It was an absolute scientific earthquake. So how is this even possible? Let's break down the chemistry. Researchers used incredibly advanced X-ray techniques to crack the case, and it turns out it's all about iron. When a dinosaur died, the hemoglobin in its extremely oxygen-rich blood released highly reactive iron nanoparticles. This iron acted as a chelator, triggering what are called Fenton-type reactions. Essentially, the dinosaur's own blood acted as a super preservative. It stabilized the tissues and protected them from microbes by formaldehyde tanning them from the inside out, eventually crystallizing into the mineral goethite. This discovery literally opened the door to studying molecular evolution in a way we never even dreamed possible. And that molecular biology brings us right into Section 4, the avian connection. Get ready, because this is the ultimate plot twist of this whole explainer. The dinosaurs, they never actually went extinct. I know, we always talk about the asteroid impact 66 million years ago as the end of the line, but that is only half the story. The massive, sprawling beasts, the ones we now call non-avian dinosaurs, yes, they were wiped out. But one specific lineage of small, feathered, warm-blooded theropods made it through the apocalypse. They adapted, they thrived, and they kept evolving. Those ultimate survivors are the avian dinosaurs. And today, there are over 11,000 living species of these avian dinosaurs. We just happen to call them birds. Seriously, think about that number for a second. Over 11,000. That makes them one of the most incredibly diverse groups of land vertebrates on the entire planet, living right alongside us, right now. The crucial takeaway here is that this connection isn't just some wild theory. It is etched directly into their biology and their behavior. Both ancient theropod dinosaurs and modern birds share hollow, pneumatized bones to save weight. They both exhibit complex nest-building and brooding behaviors to fiercely protect their young. They even both swallow small stones, called gastroliths, to help grind up and digest their food. From their ultra-high metabolic rates to their feathery coats, the evidence is simply overwhelming. That pigeon in your backyard, the seagull stealing your French fries at the beach, the majestic eagle, they are all true, living, breathing dinosaurs. Realizing that birds are quite literally dinosaurs completely blew the lid off paleontology. And that brings us to Section 5, a golden age. For a really long time, paleontology had a bit of a frustrating problem. We just didn't have enough dinosaurs to study. The fossil record felt so patchy. But today, that problem is completely gone. We are living in an absolute golden age. Just in the year 2025 alone, researchers described 44 entirely new dinosaur species. That is an astonishing rate of nearly one new dinosaur being dug up and formally named every single week. The sheer explosion of new data is breathtaking. Let's just look at a tiny fraction of what's been hitting the news wires lately. In 2025, we found Zavacephali rinpoche over in Mongolia, the oldest dome-headed plant eater ever discovered. Then, the fierce, decades-long debate over Nanotyrannus was finally settled. It turns out it's not just a teenage T-Rex, it's a resurrected, totally valid species of its own. And then, barely into 2026, researchers in the Sahara unearthed Spinosaurus mirabilis, this terrifying 40-foot hell heron with a wild scimitar-shaped head crest. Meanwhile, Spain yielded Phascea pellindonum, adding a brand new puzzle piece to the ancient European ecosystem. These jaw-dropping reveals are continuously happening all over the globe. You might be wondering, though, why should we care? Why does every single one of these new species actually matter to us today? Well, because they fill absolutely critical gaps in the evolutionary family tree. They reveal ancient climate shifts, showing us exactly how ecosystems responded to extreme global changes in the past. They showcase wildly bizarre biology, like the hollow skin spikes of the newly discovered Hollandongi that completely expands our understanding of vertebrate anatomy. Look, dinosaurs dominated this planet for 165 million years. Understanding how they survived, how they adapted, and how they faced mass extinctions is deeply, inextricably tied to our own understanding of planetary survival today. We have come such a long way. We've moved from sluggish, gray swamp lizards to hyperactive, feathered, hot-blooded marvels whose descendants are quite literally flying outside our windows right now. The paradigm hasn't just shifted, it's a whole new world. So, with scientists out there digging up a new species almost every single week and deciphering ancient molecular secrets preserved in iron, I just have to ask, what breathtaking prehistoric mystery do you think we're going to uncover tomorrow? Keep your eyes on the news, my friends, because the history of the dinosaurs is very much still being written. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next deep dive.